Welcome to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books, hosted by me, Zibby Owens. It's an award-winning podcast with over 1,900 episodes, all featuring authors of books you love and those you have yet to discover. Listen daily 5 times a week. Then go to zibbymedia.com and learn more about what the LA Times called the Zibbyverse. Zibby Media includes Zibby's Bookshop, an independent bookstore in Santa Monica, Zibby Books Publishing, Zibby Retreats, Zibby's Book Club, and more. Go check it out at zibbymedia.com and follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens. It'll take you where you need to go. Thanks for listening. Attica Locke is the author of Guide Me Home, a Highway 59 novel. She is a New York Times bestselling author of 6 novels, including Heaven, My Home, sequel to the Edgar Award-winning Bluebird, Pleasantville, winner of the Harper Lee Prize for Legal Fiction and longlisted for the Bailey's Prize for Women's Fiction, The Cutting Season, winner of the Ernest Gaines Award for Literary Excellence, and her debut Blackwater Rising, which was nominated for an Edgar Award, an NAACP Award, as well as the Los Angeles Times Book Prize, and was shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction. A former fellow at the Sundance Institute's Feature Filmmakers Lab, Attica is also a screenwriter and TV producer with credits that include Empire, When They See Us, and the Emmy-nominated Little Fires Everywhere, for which she won an NAACP Image Award for television writing. She co-created and executive produced an adaptation of her sister Tembi Locke's memoir From Scratch, a memoir of love, Sicily, and finding home for Netflix, which was a top 10 hit in 50 countries during its first weeks on air. A native of Houston, Texas, Attica lives in Los Angeles, California, with her husband and daughter. Welcome, Attica. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss Guide Me Home, a Highway 59 novel. Congrats.
Oh my God, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Okay, tell everybody about Guide Me Home, but also give a little backstory. I know this is the 3rd book in the series about Darren Matthews and everything. So give a little backstory on Darren and why it's such a big deal that his mom is coming back. I mean, this is a huge deal. The uninvited mom who hasn't had that happen.
Oh my God, yes. So basically, I started this book series where I wanted to do crime stories along Highway 59 in East Texas, because all of my people are from around these little towns up and down this highway. And I thought, wow, every book would be a new town, a new crime. And I decided that the main character would be a Black Texas Ranger who's actually quite ambivalent about the power that he holds. And I thought that that was interesting, and that made him an interesting character to write. It made it easier for me to write a police officer because he's so conflicted. And he does have a very crazy mom. Who is at the beginning of Guide Me Home, and I invite everyone to read the first 2 books in the series, Bluebird, and Heaven, My Home, to find out about his mother blackmailing him. She is in possession of a weapon that is connected to a crime that could get him in very big trouble. And she is a mom who is blackmailing both for a case of beer. Could you clean out my gutters? But also like blackmailing for love, like blackmailing for pay attention to me. Like, I'm just going to demand that my son pays attention to me. And it's just an interesting psychological dynamic. And she is so much fun to write. And so in Guide Me Home, it all comes to a head between son and mom.
This is like the book to give someone on Mother's Day to be like, no, you don't actually have it that bad. It's totally fine.
You know what's funny? Speaking of that, I remember I made my daughter one time watch Mommy Dearest. I was like, little girl, let me show you a mom who's out there.
Yeah, we need some context here,
Yeah.
Context and contrast. Well, this book opens with a scene of a young boy coming back to a spot in the woods and finding a T-shirt of a girl he had previously thought was kind of giving him the cold shoulder. I'm sure there's a more current expression for that, but blowing him off or whatever. And worrying that his discovery of it would implicate him in some way, and deciding not to share this. So immediately we're like gripped and like, oh no, this is a bad decision on like page 1. What
Right.
next? And then we get to go into Darren's life and find out more about him and how everything is going to intersect. So tell me a little bit about when you tell stories and write stories, either books or screen or whatever, how you pull in a reader right away, like any tricks of the trade, and how you came up with all the characters in this story to surround him.
I made a rule for myself about this trilogy that if it was going to be so steeped in East Texas, that it would always open in a pastoral setting.
Hmm.
So each of the three books opens outdoors in some very Texasy place, either along a highway or on a lake. And this is in the middle of these East Texas woods. And I love when regular people make a bad decision. I mean, I think we've all been confronted with situations where you ask yourself, what would I do in this situation? And if I were a person, that the character that you speak of, this young boy is Latino,
Mm-hmm.
he does not have papers to be in the States.
Yep.
If I stumbled upon an article of clothing that had blood on it, I don't know that I would just walk that to the police. But
Mm-hmm.
then I touched it. So what in the world do I do with it? I'll just take it with me, which is not a good idea. But I also understand it. So I love situations where like regular people stumble upon an extraordinary situation that has a kind of danger to it. And then what do they do? The opening of my first book, Blackwater Rising, takes place on a boat. And it's a story that happened to our family about a woman who was screaming for help in the darkness, and we heard gunshots and we didn't know what to do. And we ultimately didn't do anything. We called the police. We were like, I don't want to get involved. But you just think about what happens when you stumble upon, a person by the side of the road that's getting their tire changed. Do you help? Or is there something about the situation that could be a setup? I'm just fascinated by all these kinds of things. And I think women are. I think we're always scared about safety
Yep.
and thinking about situations like that. And so for me, openings like that suck you in. And hopefully I'm writing prose in such a way that makes you feel like you're being transported. If you've never been to the East Texas woods, maybe you get to sink in and feel like, oh, I'm someplace new. So that's
Yeah.
kind of the hope too.
Well, I feel like I definitely got a dose of Texas food. You must be a total foodie. I feel like every other page was, or like you were really hungry writing the book or something. Because like there's food everywhere and it all sounds so good and sizzling and like, even how you describe, I don't know, mushrooms. Every word, I was like, oh, that's a good choice of word. Oh, interesting. It's so food immersive.
Thank you for that. In fact, I'm not really a foodie. My sister is the foodie in the family, but writing about food is really fun. It just taps into being able to write about something very sensual. And again, I really want people to feel the East Texasness of it. And
Hmm.
so that's, one of those big markers of culture. There's music, there's food,
Yep.
so those are things that are really important to me.
And what about when you plotted out the whole story? Do you have it from the outset? Did you wait? Like, no, you just,
No, I basically just go.
okay.
And then I get about 50 pages in and I go, whoa, I don't really know what I'm doing. But I need that just like blue sky to just like start. Then I'll plot like the next little chunk and then I'll write that. And then I'll plot the next little chunk. I almost never see it all the way to the end. And part of it is I almost don't want to because there's kind of fun in the discovery.
Hmm.
It means that I sometimes have to circle back and redo things at the beginning, but that's a better process for me because it just has more discovery in it. So I almost never, I mean, I kind of knew, and I don't want to give anything away, but I kind of knew in this book who the big bad was. I just didn't know how I was going to get there.
Mm, interesting. So, how did you become interested in writing both? And you do lots of different types of writing. So, how did you? And I mean, your sister. What was going on in the house that you both ended up being authors? How do I put it in my house for my kids? And just tell me about how you got into this professionally and how. Yeah, just how did it start?
I will say, from a mom point of view, I can say we were very lucky that we had parents who said yes, who just didn't, their immediate thing wasn't no. And I feel like our parents, and I will say specifically my grandmother, summers with her in East Texas, she just let us play.
Mm.
with no parameters. She would let us literally rearrange her entire living room if we felt like it, because we wanted to play in a certain way. And as long as we put it back, she just went, go ahead, guys. And I think because we had people looked at our play and gave it space and kind of showed it respect, that I think it allowed us to find our ways, first Timby as an actor, then Timby as an author, then me as an author and TV producer. Like, it allowed us to find these spaces. And I started writing when I was a little girl, not really getting that it was anything other than something fun to do. It's funny, not funny, I want to say a moment to say that her name's Francine Pasquale,
Oh,
who
yeah. Sweet Valley High.
just passed away. And
I
and they were
know.
talking about that on NPR yesterday. And I was with my daughter, and I was remembering that when I was in middle school, I got it in my head that I could write my own series of books and like pass them around in the halls at middle school. And I never got past writing one little short story, but I just was fascinated by the fun of like making stuff up. And a lot of my early stories were love stories and just things like that. And I, at a very early age, realized that there is great pleasure in spending time alone with yourself and alone with your own mind. And I've been kind of seeking that in a lot of ways ever since.
Interesting. Well, my mother would definitely not let us rearrange her furniture. Let me just put it that way. So, in terms of having a grandmother who let the kids do that, I don't know, we're going to strike out there, but we'll find other ways. Okay, so writing, then how did you get into screenwriting? And I've read interviews with you where you say, they're so totally different. One is interior, one is like with a group of people, and it's just a
Yeah,
totally
yes,
different,
yes.
apples and oranges. Talk about that and the skill sets, sort of going back and forth. Do you like the dichotomy of it?
I think I probably couldn't do one without the other.
Hmm.
Meaning there are so I thought I was going to be a movie director. I thought I was going to be, I saw, I don't know why anybody let me see this movie in high school, but I saw She's Gotta Have It when I
Hmm.
was a sophomore in high school. And I was like, wait, what? It was the first time I was seeing not only just Black people on screen, but a Black creator doing this kind of indie aesthetic. And I was like, I want to do all of that. And so my plan, and I went to Northwestern to be a film director. I was a film student, came out of that within a few years of graduating. I did the Sundance Labs to be a movie director. And for me, writing was just, how can I get a camera? Like, writing was, I'm going to write the thing I'm going to shoot. And that will give me, my full voice. And then it just really didn't work out. It just didn't work out. I was probably, it's not fair to say, it's giving me way too much credit to say ahead of my time. But all the things that we see with great movies like Ryan Coogler doing Fruitvale Station, or you think of Barry Jenkins and Moonlight, all of these indie, rich Black films, this was 20 years before that. And basically, when the studio that I was working with was trying to raise foreign financing, they had a very old narrative in mind that foreign financiers don't care about Black American life, and so we're not going to be able to raise money. And what's funny is that my first movie, I went to the Sundance Labs with a story that was a sketch of what became Bluebird Bluebird. Talk about full circle, kind of crazy thing. So when my movie deal fell apart, I was a child. I was like 24. I was like, I don't know what is happening. I am poor. I was broke. I was newly married at 24.
Um,
He was about to go to law school, my husband.
same husband as now?
Hey, husband, yeah, we've been together for
Cool.
100 billion years. And we were broke, and I just knew I could write. So I thought, well, I'll be a screenwriter for hire. That's what I'll do, because I don't think Hollywood is interested in my stories, but I can make a living doing this thing. And I did that successfully for a very long time, if success means money. And unfortunately, or fortunately for me, money is not enough of a goal. So that even though I was working all the time, I felt so empty inside that I nothing was ever getting made. And I
Mm.
thought, wait, I made this trade-off for like no reason. And that's when I said, I'm walking away from Hollywood. I don't want to do this anymore. And I decided to write a book. And I just walked away and turned my life over to publishing, thinking I was never going back to Hollywood ever again. And then I did, because television became so incredibly rich. Television became the space where all of this deep character work and interesting sociopolitical commenting, women characters that were, all of it was moving to television. And then I was like, hello, can I come back? I want back in. And so what's great about the two things is nothing will beat the interiority of writing a novel. I liken it in some ways to training for a marathon. You're just really only in competition with yourself. You're
Mhm.
in conversation with yourself. No one's asking you to do, nobody gives a shit, excuse my language, if you run a marathon or not. And nobody cares if you write a book. But you're doing it because something's pushing you inside to do it. Whereas then there's this other thing, and I'm not a sports person, so maybe this is a horrible analogy, but then there's like being on a basketball team where you're also, or soccer is probably better because you're also running a lot. You're running a lot, but you're also then passing the ball and you're reading cues from other people. And like, they're both these valid experiences, but they give you different things. One gives you this kind of deep, quiet soul fulfillment. One makes you believe in humanity. Like one makes you believe in how cool it is that we have like, we get a shared like groupthink brain. And I've called writing and working in television symphonic, where you have this feeling of like, oh, the camera department is bringing in the horns. And then costume is just they got a percussion thing going. Oh, and then wait a minute, the actor's over here doing something really interesting with the flute. And somehow you've made this beautiful thing that literally could not exist if it wasn't all of these people. And when it's doing that, it's kind of amazing to watch. And it is a kind of beautiful thing about people coming together. I am a gregarious introvert. So sometimes I will be honest, it exhausts me where I'm like, oh, that's a lot of talking to people. But then other times I'm like, people are so cool. Aren't we cool when like we work together? So I just think the balance of the two things is great. And in terms of skill set, I think both novels and being a showrunner require you to be able to hold a lot of plot scaffolding. And
Mhm.
I think each has helped me do the other. Being a novelist and having to hold an entire book or a book series means that I can hold 8 episodes in my head and know that a choice that we're making on set in episode 3, how it's going to affect episode 7. And then in writing this last book, which I finished it after having done from scratch, you know what really changed the way that I write? Having gone through post production and editing and realizing, oh, you could take this is a great passage, it doesn't belong there. What if you moved it here? What would that do? And like, just I wrote much more linearly.
Mhm.
I felt so much more permission to play as if I were moving blocks around, which is the thing that you end up doing in post production. So
Huh.
that I'm very grateful to have had that post production experience because it did affect now how I look at prose and I know other prose writers have always acted like that, or have always written that way, but not me. So that was a new thing for me that was really kind of cool that I could see my brain could do that because of this other experience that I'd had.
That is super cool. Oh my gosh. So you said a minute ago, screenwriting, being a screenwriter for hire, you didn't feel successful. Do you feel successful now?
Yes, I do feel successful, and it sneaks up on me though, because sometimes I'm very much what's happening right now. So
Mhm.
I will like almost half forget that I wrote such and such a book, or not that I forget that I did from scratch because it changed my life, but sometimes people come up and go, "Oh my God, that really moved." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, you watched that?" Like it's like I complete because I'm not doing it anymore. It's like I completely forgot. Oh yeah, that's still on Netflix. People are still like experiencing it. So I'm normally just going through my life doing my thing. And every now and then I'll realize the success is the feeling that, oh, what I did actually mattered. It actually touched somebody. So that's the thing that sneaks up on me and is so fulfilling is to realize, oh, because I've always believed when I'm reading a book or I'm watching a TV show that it has made me feel closer to other people or has made me understand the world in a different way. Oh, I'm doing that for other people too. So that is a feeling of success when that happens. Yeah.
I mean, I think you're successful, so there's that. For what it's worth.
It's I think it's just like when you're like in your normal life
Mhm.
and you're being a mom or you're just like getting groceries or you're making your little yogurt bar. You're just not thinking about anything but like being just alive and normal and just I literally will forget sometimes that I didn't just write books in a vacuum, but they're being consumed. And I'll get an email from someone saying something nice, and I'll be, oh, yeah, that's right. People actually read it. That's
Yeah.
cool.
Oh, that's the best. When you said from scratch totally changed your life, elaborate.
Oh, my word. Well, it was the hardest thing I've ever done, ever. I had to learn and stretch myself so much. I had to learn about trust. I had to learn about standing in my power, how and when to use the word no. I learned about what I call elegant conflict or respectful conflict. That when you gather and work with people that you really respect and trust, it's actually a good thing if you disagree. Like you're going to make the work better. And it took me a while to realize, I think as women, or I'll just say for me, I wouldn't consider myself a conflict averse person, but I get a little anxious, like, why aren't we agreeing? Oh no, why aren't we agreeing? And I got deep into production before I realized, oh, not agreeing is making this show better, because then that person had an idea that I was like, no, but then I'll go, oh, actually, yeah. Or then that would happen when I had an idea that someone would say no to, and they'd go, wait a minute, yeah. And then or you disagree, you do four different takes, and in editing, you realize, oh, thank God we had all these takes, because now I can piece them together and tell this story with a great kind of level to it that I maybe wouldn't have done if we'd only done it one way. Like I really learned that. And of course, I was blessed in that situation, obviously, to work with my sister. But I was surrounded by women. Our director was a woman. Our producers were women. We had one male producer who rolled with us and just let us take the lead with our very female energy. But it meant that we could all disagree and still get in the van on the way home from set and laugh and hug and do all these things. And that was a real revelation to me and a reminder that going forward in my life, I hope that I do consistently surround myself with people I trust, and that it's okay to disagree if we're doing it with great respect. So that was just the real, and from scratch had a magical quality. It just can't. It just the idea that I just happened to bring it up one day to Reese Witherspoon's company, and they read the book. I was like, yeah, let's. It's just all so serendipitous, and it also taught me this thing that Timby says all the time. you know, we had such a magical experience where we'd be like, why is this happening? Like, why is the woman who's playing Lino's mom, how is she best friends with Timby's late husband's childhood friend? Like, how is this happening? And Timby at one point said, why don't we stop asking why? Because I don't think we'll ever really know why. And instead, let's just say thank you.
Aw.
And it became this way of going through life of thinking, I don't know why sometimes, but I can just say thank you. I'm really glad that this is happening.
That gives me goosebumps, actually. I love that. I love
It's
that.
as you know, my sister's a very exceptional person and has a wonderful, very deep way of looking at the world. And I feel very blessed that I get to do a part of my artistic life with her. It's a real blessing.
That's awesome. So wonderful. And so what next? Not that you have to have anything next, but I'm sure you have a million irons in the fire.
Well, we are trying to do more wonderful things together. We have this producing and writing deal at Universal Television. We are now adapting one of my books, which is the Bluebird, which is the first in this Guide Me Home series. We are now adapting and figuring out how to make this character, this Texas Ranger, live on screen. And that's like a reversal of what we were doing before when it was her book. So that's fun. And we've got a couple of other book adaptations. One about a family that inherits, that actually siblings that inherit a vineyard in Napa, and it's like kind of a soapy family drama. There's something that was just announced where we're going to try to adapt a book that's about the twin sounds of blues and country, with a
Mm.
Black woman at the center who's maybe starting a life as a Black country artist. So we're just playing around with lots of things and are being, just having fun, just trying to have fun. And I'm of course thinking of my next book and figure out how that's going to fit in with all these other wonderful things I have going. And I think what's so interesting is my husband said, how funny that our daughter's going off to college and you wrote a book about a college student that goes missing. Are you trying to express some kind of fear? And I was like, I hadn't even thought of that.
Wow.
And I haven't thought about another book that has to do with college. And I probably am some part. I don't even know if I'll write it, but it's on my mind. And I think part of it has to do with me working through this big shift that's happening, which is my kid leaving home.
Oh my gosh. I'm not ready for that. It's like hard enough when my kids went to boarding school, but wow, impressive. So much great stuff. Just really awesome. So what advice would you give to aspiring authors?
Oh my. Well, there's the classic of read, 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 read. That's really a way to both be inspired, but also to challenge yourself to make sure that you're not falling into tropes because there's a joke between authors about what is the thing that like so many people have books where they have characters that have gray eyes. That's like 0.5% of the population. But like when you read a lot of books, you realize, oh, there's like a lot of tropes out there, and maybe you'll challenge yourself to not fall into them. But the other thing I'll bring up, I talk about this woman all the time, Jane Smiley, and I talk about her book, 13 Ways of Looking at the Novel. And she says in that book that the only way that you can fail at a first draft is to not finish it. So I believe you have to go forward if you want to write a novel with great compassion for yourself and great patience, and also figure out a way to make it fun. Again, no one's asking you to do it. So you might as well have fun. You might as well, if music is your thing, if it's making tea, if it's scotch, if it's, going to a cabin, if you, whatever it is, because no one's asking you to do it. So, and it's going to take a significant portion of your life. So why not make that portion of your life joyful and fun? That would be my advice. Yeah.
I love it. Attica, thank you so much. Really appreciate
Thank you,
your time.
Zibby. This has been delightful.
Thanks for listening to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. If you love it, please leave a review and follow us on social at Zibby Owens and at Zibby Readers.